you learn all those algorithms in school, all the main one, all the random forest and the stuff like that, and you arrive, and yes, you end up applying one or two. But to be fair, if you go really deep at some point, if you want something very specific, you have to build an algorithm that's very specific. And it will sometimes use the beautiful already built library from Python, but sometimes actually you need to do a lot of the work.
All right, so hello everyone and welcome to the AI Stories podcast. I'm Neil Leiser, I'm a data scientist at Iwoca, and I will be your host. So today our guest is Marguerite Graveleau. Marguerite first studied engineering at École Polytechnique in Paris, and then she did an MSc in energy resources at Stanford. After that, she had a bunch of experiences, but then she joined Lyft in 2018 as a data scientist. She was still in the US at this time, but then actually moved back to France and quit data science to do an MBA. So something quite different. Now she is actually at Iwoca, the same company as me, and she works as a product manager there. But before that, she was actually an operation strategy lead. So this episode is actually a special one for two reasons. First of all, as I mentioned, Marguerite and I both work at Iwoca. We are colleagues and friends. So it's actually, I've really wanted to record an episode with someone from Iwoca for a long time. So really looking forward for this conversation. I'm sure we'll have a lot of fun. And the second reason why this is a special episode is because it's actually the last episode of the season. I'm going to take a break in the summer, prepare season 2, and let's meet back in September with new ideas and lots of new amazing guests. So if you enjoyed the episodes, subscribe to the AI Stories YouTube channel or follow Marguerite and I on LinkedIn. All right, so let's start the conversation now. Hi, Marguerite. How is it going?
Hi, Neil. Good, and you?
Good. How are you? How is your week?
Good. Busy week, as always, at Iwoca, as you know. But good, busy.
I know. Good, but interesting work, hopefully.
Exactly.
So I first kind of want to know, well, I mentioned this in the intro, you've started your career in data science. So how did you get into this world of data science and AI and machine learning? How did this start?
Yeah, well, it was not the plan originally. So I think you said I studied engineering and I did a lot of math, but not really stats or anything. And when I arrived in the US for grad school, I had never heard about machine learning before. It was in 2013 or 14. So I think it was already something, but I just hadn't caught up yet. And so I arrived and I study energy, and I see those classes of machine learning, no idea what that was, and programming. I was like, I don't want to do programming. With like 1,000 people every quarter. I'm like, okay, maybe there's something out there. Maybe I should just check it out. And I checked it out, and I thought it was fantastic. And I realized that all my friends were working in this, and it was a massive industry. I kind of discovered tech in grad school, and I decided this is what I wanted to do. And so I started to take more and more classes. I didn't change my master, but just enough classes to have enough to start as data scientist, a junior data scientist, and that was it.
So that was during your master at Stanford, right?
Exactly, during my master. So officially the master was like in energy, and my advisor was very keen on me exploring other things. As long as I wasn't swapping classes for something that was just easy and me hiding away, as long as it was per genuine interest and interesting classes, he was quite keen on me going. So that was really helpful, actually.
And was this before the time where AI was really popular, or just at the beginning?
I think it was happening at that time. As I said, like the machine learning class still had like 1,000. So it's the very famous one by Andrew Ng, and it still had like 1,000 people every 3 months. Okay. So I think that's famous class.
Yeah.
Famous. So that was already a thing over there, at least.
Do you know what you liked so much about AI? Because you mentioned that was kind of new. You didn't have this during your bachelor or during your time in Paris. So what did you find so interesting in the field?
So I think I always liked math. But the thing is, like, if you don't think about AI and you think about math, the jobs that would involve math are all the bank ones and a quant in like investment banks, which is not something I was particularly attracted to, mostly because of all the cliches around it. I can't say whether I would have liked it or not, but for sure I didn't want to go. And so I didn't really see a way where I could use this and still have a job. And when I found tech, it was like, okay, I can actually do both what I like and have a job that's interesting and in a company where I think it would be nice to work in. And so I think this I particularly like, plus the fact that it's completely booming, and it's quite energizing to be in an industry that's forever growing.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So that's where basically at Stanford you chose a lot of AI, data science, stats courses, and that's how you got into
exactly.
the field.
And when I say a lot, I wouldn't say a lot, because I still had to do all of my minimal, like the minimum number of classes in energy. But I'd say like 1 or 2 a quarter. So the basic stats, basic machine learning, basic programming. So 1 or 2 of each of those. And I think that was enough to start, to be fair.
And so, okay, so you're at Stanford, you do those classes, you start to learn more about the field, and then you apply for jobs to work in industry. So how does this work, and how do you get your first job in AI and data science?
I think the first job is the first hard to get ever in your life.
Yeah,
except if you then change careers, because then it's the same than the first job. You always feel like you have nothing to offer. I think that's wrong, but everybody feels like, you're begging for a job. So I think I was lucky. Well, I found this startup that did data science for the energy sector. And so I could kind of build up on all of the knowledge I had about also the energy sector, because I was obviously not particularly trained as a data scientist. And I didn't even do internship or nothing. I had nothing to really showcase. So I took this startup, and I think also, they just trusted me. It was very small. I was one of the first employees. I hardly knew how to code in Python, at least. So they kind of took a little bit of bet on me. But that's how I got. I didn't go for the full. I didn't apply at Facebook. I'm not sure I had a shot at that yet.
Maybe now you could do it.
Maybe now. I haven't tried yet, so I don't know. I don't know how that would go.
But what's your advice for job applications when you don't really have much experience? What did you do to get this job, or what would be your advice? What can people do to get a job when they don't have much experience, or even no experience at all?
I'd say, well, you had to do a few things. So first, do work on your resume, because you might think you have nothing to offer, but I think you must have studied things. You must have done projects that you can showcase as something that's interesting, like really. And if you don't, start there. Do a project in a class that you can showcase in your resume, or even do an internship if you can. But if you haven't done an internship, just pick a class where it's project-based, and, pick something that you can talk about in an interview. I think that works. No one else has experiences. We are just outside of school, like you're competing with people who are the same than you. And people who are hiring you, they know you don't have an experience. Like we do recruit juniors, right? And you make a bet. You want to see more like motivation and willingness to learn than actionable experience. So this is what you had to show. And then in terms of applying, well, apply to as many companies as you can. And ideally, if you have a network through school or through friends, go through that if you can talk to people directly. And don't hesitate to cold email. Just I've sent email on LinkedIn to people I didn't know at all, and they answer sometimes.
There are quite a lot of advice there, so I'm going to summarize and also give my ideas. But one was do a project, and I think that's super important, because you will also just learn much more by doing a project than by just watching a lecture online or following a course. If you do a project, you're going to learn 10 times more. So definitely do a project, plus it's going to help on your resume. So yeah, definitely.
And it doesn't have to be big, by the way. It doesn't have to be scary. It can be a very small thing with then another small project.
Yeah, I feel like also people maybe underestimate the things that they do. Like, as you mentioned, a lot of people, they have lots of projects, and some people will come to me, oh, Neil, what should I put in my CV? I don't have any project. I haven't done anything. And then you ask them, okay, what course did you take at uni? Did you do a project there? Yeah, that's a project. Like, it doesn't have to be building a company on your own,
Yeah, exactly that.
People will think, oh, I need to do a project. It means I need to start my company. Or
for 6 months and do like 8 hours a day. It's like, this is not it.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point. And I actually discussed this in so many episodes that start with by doing a project. That's probably the best advice. I think the other advice are actually quite good. One was cold email. Like you don't necessarily need to apply to, well, by the normal process, like sending your CV and then doing the interviews, because there is a lot of competition there. So you kind of want to set yourself apart from the rest, and sending a cold email could help with that.
Also, I would add, I remember when you ask for a job, you feel like you would take anything. But me, when I receive applications from someone who say I would do anything, just take me. I'm like, yeah, but then I don't know what to give you. Whereas when I receive an email from someone says, hey, I studied this, I really want to work on this type of things. Well, if then I have a spot for this, I'm much more inclined to actually talk to you because I feel it's going to be a good match. So while remaining open, do say, hey, I really liked coding in Python, and so I do want to do optimization algorithm. Or actually what I like is data digging, and in this project I've done this, and I went into all the deep metrics, and I would love to do something similar. Can I work with you? So do pick something you like, and it really helps having people answer you and help you.
Yeah, so be quite specific in the message. Like don't just say I want to work in your company, or I want to, I would do anything I could to have a job or something like that.
Even if it's true, it just doesn't resonate with the person you're going to email.
No, that makes sense. So yeah, just a specific message like, I saw that your team was working on that, your company was doing this, I've done those projects which are kind of related, and I would love to join and learn more.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a great advice that I don't often do, actually, like cold emails, or when I applied for a job, I was just trying to go through the normal process. And I think it's kind of an underrated thing to do, and it can actually help you land a lot of jobs, I think.
Yeah.
And also one thing is I'm doing this now when I try to find guests for the podcast or whatever, is following up. Like if you send just one message, it's fine to follow up a couple of times. Like you don't, 1 or 2 times, I would say. Maybe don't follow up 10 times, because at some point the person is just not interested. But sometimes they missed your message, and it's not because they're ignoring you that they don't want you. So don't hesitate to follow up as well.
This is true too. Very true.
So yeah, thanks for those advice. You actually, not sure which one you follow. You mentioned you were cold emailing a lot of companies. You had some projects. You found your first job. You worked there for a while, and then you actually land a position as a data scientist at Lyft. So I want to focus on this now. Like, first of all, what is Lyft? What is the company doing? Can you give like a brief overview for those who still don't know the company?
So Lyft is the main competitor of Uber, and they do exactly what Uber does. They do just a bit less. So they don't do Uber Eats, and they're not abroad. They're only in the US and in Canada. But in US and Canada, it's literally the same. So ride hailing, really, really exactly the same. And so when I joined, we were 2,000 employees, I think. And by the time I left, it was like 5,000. So we're talking about like 200 or 250 data scientists only in the company.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's by itself, it became really big.
So I guess different teams of data scientists, right?
Yeah, well, the thing, it's a company that, like a lot of those big techs, every single part of your business has data scientists to support. If they don't even do the core of the product that you build. So
in which team were you working? So
I did a few teams, but mostly I was working in the team that does, we call it driver and passenger incentives. So you know how, I mean, surely you know, and people who listen to, like sometimes you receive on Uber those discounts, say, hey, you'll get £10 off of your next 10 rides. That's kind of an incentive. And the company actually has a lot of other things when you think about it to change the balance between supply and demand. So you can change the price. You can do also, you know, how like in real time, how the price increases when the demand is too high. So that's the prime time. I think we've all experienced this one.
Yeah, very annoying.
Very well. They're very efficient. Like sometimes you have no choice. You have to balance your market, you know. It's very weird how you have access here to the two sides. And then there's those things that we call weekly ones, which is more like, it's not instant, but it's not also changing the long-term price. It's like this week, I'm going to send some number of promotions to my passengers, which is hopefully going to increase the demand. And we have exactly the same kind of tools, except that we have a few more. I mean, we had, or they had, a few more for the drivers. And so I was working in those teams.
Okay, so both for the customers and for the drivers.
So I was on the driver side, but obviously like we all form like kind of a unity of teams because we apply, it's very similar algorithms and techniques where you want to optimize the increase in either demand or supply with the same amount of money that you're going to spend.
Okay, so you have a budget and your goal is to, within this budget.
That's actually interesting. This is where this becomes, we don't have a budget, or the goal of the team is to build the tool where if I give you some money, I'm going to get you as much more demand or supply as I can in the best way. But then people who would choose how much to increase or decrease the amount of money were actually operations who were like in charge of maintaining a healthy market. So if you have a city, you're in charge of the city, you ask data scientists to help you build tools and optimize the tool and make them the best as they can. But then you know that there's a concept of Taylor Swift. And so you know that you'll have to do something about it. So it's people with the local knowledge and very much hands-on in the market that would use those tools to balance it out.
So what's the goal here? Is it to have an equilibrium between supply and demand? Like you don't want too many drivers and you don't want...
Exactly. Well, the goal exactly is this. Is like if you want the best experience now, so have as many rides as you can on the day, but also long-term. And if you have too much demand, it's great, but people are going to churn because they have to wait for rides all the time. It's annoying. And if you have too much supply, well, it's drivers who are going to never come back work for you because they worked for 5 hours and they had 2 rides and it's not worth their time. So it's quite important to have like the right balance.
How do you balance that, like this short term versus long term? Because short term is easy. You want to make as much money, but as you mentioned, that's kind of
to be fair, here it's kind of the same. If you have the best experience and you have exactly the right supply and demand, hopefully you can grow two together to have more rides. But if you provide the best experience now, it's going to prove rewarding in the future.
Okay.
So it's not a complete conflict of interest here.
So if you have equilibrium most of the time, you would think that's kind of the best scenario in the long term because you're making money and everyone is kind of happy.
And you offer the best customer experience.
Okay,
so
cool.
Hopefully everybody wins.
Yeah. Super annoying when I know it's probably good for the equilibrium when you have a ride, you order something on Uber or Lyft or whatever, and you have a price and then they kind of cancel and then you reorder and the price is like 2x higher, but well, I can say like it's a new market, no one has figured it out perfectly. I'm pretty sure like if you look at those things in 10 years it will behave differently. For sure. So can you maybe give an example of one like particular project that you worked on within this equilibrium of driver and...
So actually following up on this, so you're here, you have those tools here for supply and those tools for demand, and you know that the operational teams they will use your tools to try to, when they know what they're going to increase or decrease. But it's not like there's no textbook around dual markets like this, it hasn't existed before, like those companies, or it's very new. So there's no the notion of equilibrium that we talk about here, although like for us it seems obvious, it seems like a concept that makes sense. But no one knows what the equilibrium is. How do you measure it? How do you get there? Like this is the thing where we know it should exist, but like to be fair, like it's not something that's easy to calculate. And so we were like, okay, surely now that we have this, surely we could give recommendation to the operational teams to also use those tools well. At some point, you can have the most precise algorithm as possible to optimize those £10 per week. If it's not used in the right way, it's like a bit useless to optimize your new algorithm for 1% more when 50% is used poorly. So we're like, okay, can we do this? And so that was a very long project to kind of build a big simulation where you're like, okay, if I add more supply or if I add more demand, what happens? And that kind of informs whether you should add one or the other and what's the value into adding some. So that was kind of a very nice tool to build, very new too.
Is it what happens in the short term or in the long term as well?
Short term.
Okay, short term.
Coming back to this idea that offering the best customer experience now will be rewarding in the future.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So that's not really that's not an AI algorithm. It's more playing with data and economy or?
It was more like econometry and optimization. But I think that's something that's very true. You know, you learn all those algorithms in school, all the main one, all the random forest and the stuff like that. And you arrive, and yes, you end up applying one or two. But to be fair, if you go really deep at some point, if you want something very specific, you have to build an algorithm that's very specific. And it will sometimes use the beautiful already built library from Python, but sometimes actually you need to do a lot of the work. So, and I think that's true in lots of things.
Yeah, I agree that especially when you do a course, and this is something I also discuss quite a lot. When you do a course or a master, they teach you how to use those latest state-of-the-art machine learning model and things like that. And then you arrive at a company and you're like, okay, we need to do this. Those are the best models. We need to do this. But yeah, actually, a lot of non-AI and machine learning algorithms, which are simpler in some sense, maybe even more complicated, can actually do the job much better than a state-of-the-art deep learning algorithm.
I think everybody who starts to work in this company is shocked to see how much is linear regression everywhere. And it's fine because it works. So why complicate things when it works?
Yeah, I think in industry, you care less about improving the accuracy by 0.1%. And you just want something that works well, that's not too difficult to implement, that adds value, that is easy to understand.
That's robust, that's not going to break, that's not sensitive to input. Yes, that's true. But I think it's still important to know the most important, like the most, a little bit more complex algorithm, because I think it informs how you could improve on those. But you should always start by the easy one. Start by the easy one, and then you will see.
So do you, with this model, do you have an idea of how much money you managed to, well, what impact you had with this model and how much money you managed to make the company win? Or
yeah, I think
what was
it was
the impact?
way above my own salary. I think they made a lot of money on this one. No, I don't remember the numbers exactly, and I don't want to give all the numbers that they spent actually per week on those things. But it was very significant.
It was a good number.
Yeah, we think so. Well, it's always hard to estimate because you can't really A/B test this one, or you can't really measure, and each day is different from the other one. But yeah, estimation was we were quite happy with it.
Cool. So then after, well, you work at Lyft for 2 years, something like that?
2 years. Right? More or less, yeah.
Within 2 years, the company more than doubled its size. I guess you started probably with a smaller team of data scientists, and the team started to grow and grow. Did this change your experience, like from when you start to when you ended? Was there a difference between how the team of data scientists was being managed and the structure of the company?
So the structure of the company didn't change. I think it was a bit chaotic because it grew so fast that, you can't really. But when I joined, we were already 100 data scientists.
Okay.
So it was already big, and I was already not knowing what everybody was doing. But for sure, at 250, there are massive parts of the business where you have no idea what they were doing. And so that was quite. You're really a tiny part of the big machine. I don't think it was more chaotic than before. Maybe I haven't seen it, or maybe my managers were good about it and dealing with all the thing. But to be fair, it was also a company that the product wasn't really quite set. And like we weren't creating something completely new. We were forever improving and finding new ways of doing it better, which is not as challenging as when you go from 10 people to 50. That I think is
makes sense. You're already quite a lot
in place. So.
And after that, you go back to Paris, right? And you do an MBA, so something completely different. Can you touch on this? Why do you decide to do this MBA?
It's kind of,
data science. You didn't like data science anymore?
I love data science. A lot of people would see an MBA as like those people who have a very big career goal and they want to go to an MBA and then they do consulting or they go to investment banking. That was not why I did it, really, really not at all. So I think there are two things. The first one was I've kind of always wanted to do one. I was so specialized on math, so specialized on math. I kind of felt like I wanted to see the other side of how a company runs. Like by the point I think I reached those 3 years of work, I realized I didn't want to become a data science manager. I didn't want to work only on those algorithms. I wanted to get something much more hands-on on the growth of the business and closer to, I don't know, operations, closer to the users, something like that. Like I wanted something with like maybe a shorter range of time in between. Like my last algorithm, the big one, it took 6 months to do. And while it was great and very fulfilling, I think I worked better in a faster paced environment. So there was that, and that genuine curiosity of seeing something else. And I've always dreamt a little bit about doing an MBA. I like school. I like going to school. I think you have several ways to learn something new. You could just get another job, or try another project in your company. I think going to school is something that worked for me, and so I was happy to do it. But I think there are many ways to do it. And the second one was, by that time I was having this feeling that I wanted kind of something new, but I was not going to action it. Like it was kind of more like a little idea in the back of my head. Maybe I would have done it in my current company. And then the US being the US, I was kind of running out of my current visa. And there was a very, very good chance that I was not going to be renewed. Even though the company wanted to renew me, sponsoring me, there's a lottery. So it's down to a lottery and chance. Like, okay, if I don't get this time the lottery, I'm out and I'm going back to Europe and I don't know what to do. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to apply to this MBA and we'll see. And I got the MBA. And so by the time I was like, okay, it's really painful to apply to those masters. So I'm just going to go. So I went.
Do you think it will help you for your future?
I don't know. I keep asking myself that. But I'm sure that on a personal level, it was incredible. It's a bit like, your undergrad. It's challenging, it's new, you meet new people, but you grow a lot as a person. It's a bit the same. You do another year of undergrad, but at 30 years old or 29 years old. So in that sense, it's very, very interesting. In terms of pure career, I don't know. I honestly don't know.
You will see in 10 years. We should record another episode.
We'll see in 10 years. For sure, I'm not sure I would have. So now I work in product at Iwoca, right? I think I could have got a product role without an MBA. But I joined Iwoca as an operations strategy. And I don't think I would ever had an operations strategy role without an MBA on my resume. I wouldn't have gone from data scientist to operations strategy. I think that's quite a gap there.
Do you think that's also something that's kind of missing, like data scientists who also have a good understanding of business and of management and of how things work? I think sometimes it's quite classic I don't want to generalize, but a lot of data scientists are really deep into the technical stuff, understanding the algorithm and optimizing a metric, but maybe a lot of them should actually do something like that, a management course or an MBA, to have a better view of the business. What do you think?
It goes the other way too. A lot of business type of people don't get any kind of understanding of the technical side. So I think it's really on the two. I'd say, like, if you are interested, you should always go and check it out. But if you're not, maybe don't, but be very aware that you're not. And so rely on other people to do it for you. Which means, like, in a company, you have to just be aware, like, some people are going to be very technical and they're very good at it and they don't particularly want to know something else. And some people will be like more business minded and don't really want to know. They want to be told how it works and that's it. But you do have to make sure that some people will make the bridge, which is very often what you would call the PM, but it could be just because one of your data scientists is really good at doing the business side. It could be, just because you have the right skills in your team, but you do need some people to do it. And I think it is very valuable to do both. Well, I do think it makes me better at my job. Is
this then what you kind of really like the intersection between management and tech and data?
Yes, I love that. This is what I want to do. This is what I'm a product role now. I think doing those bridges, the bridge here is really, really something I like.
You're a product role for a technical team, right?
Yes.
So let's talk about Iwoca actually before we dive into your role. I'm going to ask the same question then I asked for Lyft. First of all, so basically you do your MBA and then you join Iwoca. You started as an operation strategy lead. What is Iwoca like? What is the company doing? I think maybe lots of people can be familiar with Lyft, maybe less with Iwoca. So what is Iwoca? What is the company doing?
So Iwoca stands for Instant Working Capital. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's it. So the idea is It's the clients, the users are all small or medium enterprises, business owners. So we're talking plumber, electricity company, pubs, restaurants, import companies, transports, construction, those kind of like really like small enterprises that you see around, SMEs. And what you see is that they usually struggle to get finances. So if they want a loan, very often the big banks are going to either say no because they're too high risk, or the amounts are so small that the big banks don't want to bother, or it's going to take weeks and weeks because they have to file the big application. So getting finances, short-term finances for those companies is quite hard. And that's kind of what Iwoca wants to fill the gap. It's help those SMEs get better finance. So the idea is like we're now like 350 employees, so we're quite big. We've been around for 10 years. And the idea is like if you're a business owner, you go online, you apply. If it's for a small-ish loan, you can get an instant decision. Otherwise, you'd have to upload a few docs, but like literally in a day, you could get the money in your account. And we would finance companies that maybe wouldn't be financed by bigger companies. So that's Iwoca.
Yeah, and we're mostly available in the UK and right and Germany.
Yeah, exactly.
So UK, Germany, and the kind of naive question that a lot of people ask me is, what's the difference with a bank? Like, why wouldn't I go to a bank and ask for a loan there? Why Iwoca?
Well, you can. We exist because the bank will say no to you. Really. I think there's this. And also, I think it's a different type of loan that we provide. So a big bank will give you a loan on a year, maybe a bigger amount. And then you have fees if you repay early. Iwoca is not that. Iwoca is really like to help you with your cash flows. Meaning, I think the best example, if you're like a gas station, you own a gas station, every month you need to buy oil. So you take a loan at Iwoca, you buy your oil, you sell your oil, and then you repay the loan in a month or in 2 weeks. And then 3 months later, you can do it again. But it's very flexible. You can repay early, you can take more money, you can repay early without fees. So it's more like meant to be really like a cash flow help here than a very long-term loan. So it's quite different.
Yeah,
it's a flexibility that a bank won't give you.
And maybe also quite fast service. Like you can really, as you mentioned, you can really get instant decisions and a loan within a very fast loan, like within a few days or hours sometimes.
I mean, the goal is hours. So
yeah. So you started as an operations strategy lead. The job title seems fancy, but I'm not entirely sure what exactly does this mean. Can you try to explain what you were doing for the first year and a half that you were there?
I'd say that obviously I wasn't doing operations strategy because we talked about it, right? I had no experience in operations and no experience in strategy whatsoever. I think what it means, I guess it's a role that means different things in different companies. A bit like PM, by the way, a bit like data scientists. Those roles, they kind of all mean different things. I think at Iwoca, so operations is we have 85 people who are the people who are going to call the customers, help the customers, apply when they struggle, upload, review the documents, etc., etc., etc. This is a massive process throughout the user journey, and it's very important we get it right. But when you manage all of those people, you don't have so much time on your hands to actually improve those processes and get it better. And that's why we have operation strategy. So we don't manage any of the operation people, but we are on their side and say, okay, this is where I see improvement. This is where I think we could improve. This is what we could do better. This is where we could call more, we could call less. It's how to make all this team more productive and deliver a better customer experience. So that's operation strategy. And at Iwoca, I think it involves a lot of things. It involves a little bit of pure processes improvement. So strategically, okay, we know that the goal for the company in the year is this. How do we make sure ops is ready for that? A lot of business intelligence, because I think there's a lot of digging into your data to see where the bottlenecks are and to make sure we monitor it correctly. And a little bit
can you give an example of that? Like what do you mean by understanding your data?
Every day my boss would come to me, he's like, how are we doing this week? How do I answer that? Well, I need to look at how we called the customer we were supposed to call. How much work have we done? How many people were stuck in the funnel or not stuck in the funnel? Did we get enough people to get the loans when they applied? And if not, why? So all of the things, I need to have visuals on them. I need to be aware of what's happening at that time. And so that's what I call business intelligence.
That makes sense. So still like analyzing data in some sense. So
A
still
lot of analyzing data. It's not data scientist in the sense it's not an algorithm that I'm building, but it's a lot of data acumen and knowing where to look at the right things to make sense and to drive decision from it.
Okay, so it's an overview of the entire operation team, which is quite big, as you mentioned. We are like 350, and those are like, slightly below 100 people, so 1/3 of the company. And you're analyzing the data to, first of all, try to see how well we're doing in terms of, I don't know, profits, but also in terms of customers, like, are we taking care of our customers? Do they get the loan that they want? Things like that, I guess. And the second thing would be, how can we improve our processes to be even more efficient and do even better?
Exactly.
Can we dive into, again, one project that you worked on a high level, like one example of things that you've improved or interesting thing that you saw in the data?
Interesting. I haven't thought about this one enough. One of the things we built, maybe we could talk about what we call task management. So we realized at the beginning, you don't have a lot of operational people and they all know their customers. So each account manager, which is part of this operational team, would have, like 15 clients and they know who to call when they have a loan, etc. We're talking now with people who are like 1,000 people in the portfolio. Obviously, they can't keep track of who to call when. It's not something I would even ask of anybody. And so we built this entire tool, which is called task management, which takes all of the portfolio of the users and say, oh, they just applied, they need more doc, we need to call them today or in a week. Oh, they applied, they haven't taken their loan yet, maybe there's a problem, let's call them in 2 days. And so it kind of orders this by priority here, everybody that they should keep an eye on and when they should call them. And so that's a very, very powerful tool to build. But it's both understanding when they call who, defining the rules around, again, like around who to call who and make sure that it makes sense and that we don't skip anyone. And then going to tech and having people implement it with you.
Okay, cool. That's actually really cool. So it's a kind of big system that takes all the tasks that all our employees need to do, like calling a customer back or sending them an email or whatever. And it kind of prioritizes those things in terms of what are the most important things to do.
Exactly. And so it's also something where we know, like if you have a task that, they went there and they were stuck, I can check that we have called them. We make sure that we called them. So it's also a way of making sure that we're good at calling and helping the customers when they need help without them always having to call us. Like we can be proactive in it because a lot of people won't call. If they're stuck, they're just stuck.
So is one idea also to monitor what we're doing, or was this already the case before?
I actually strongly believe that we should monitor every single thing that we do in every single company, not only in ops, everywhere. Because monitoring is what will prevent you. It's always okay to make mistakes, but you're never going to know unless you monitor it. And you can only solve it if you see it. So it's always, if you make any effort, put it on the monitoring, because at least you'll solve all of the other things you can get wrong.
I think that's also true in data science. And I learned this at
true in data science.
Like usually, again, when you do a course, you would just train your model. And then once your model is trained, it's done. You've done your job and perfect. You get good grades or something like that. But here, first of all, you need to deploy your model in production, which is the first thing. But then monitoring is just super important. Like, is my model working as expected? Is it getting the data that it needs? Because sometimes you think your model is working as expected, but you realize that it's missing a part of the data and the predictions are wrong. And then you also need to monitor the data that goes into your model. Like, if you train your model on 2021 data, maybe 2022 data is completely different. And if you don't notice this, for example, pre-COVID and post-COVID, right? If you don't notice this and you keep the same model, then your model is going to be very bad because it hasn't been trained on this kind of data. So definitely monitoring the models is, I think, one of the most important things to do. If you deploy a model, but you don't monitor it, things can really go wrong.
And I think it goes with like ownership. Just in general in your job, is like if you feel like you own this model, there's a difference between the people who will just, I'm being asked to do it, so I do it. And then the people who are like, okay, I want it to work and I'm going to make sure that this works. And that's very, very different. And if you want to grow and have more important roles, you need to get to the ownership level.
Yeah, that's a super important point. Like just making sure that you keep looking at it. It's also, and making sure, yeah, it's not because you've deployed it and you have some graphs that are being used that it's done. You need to actually look at this model frequently.
Exactly.
And
I think it's exactly what you said. It's not a class anymore. Like the success metric is not to do it. The success metric is like it delivers what it's supposed to deliver.
Yeah,
So.
and I think also in a credit risk company, the challenge is if your model or whatever is wrong, it can go really bad. Like you're giving loans to people. So if you start giving loans to frauds or things like that, within a couple of months, the business can go really wrong. So you definitely need to keep an eye on everything, like a lot of metrics, because you can never rest and say, okay, I'm going to look into this next year, because next year it's going to be too late, actually.
Yeah.
What do you think are the challenges in AI, but also in general, specifically of working in a credit risk company and lending money? What would be the challenges, you think?
Ooh, it's interesting. I think it's a general in AI, like you deal with human beings. So every time you deal with human being behaviors, it's very, very hard to estimate. Like you want to estimate if they're going to come back for a loan, but it doesn't depend on you or what you produce, right? It depends so much on whether people are actually or feel, or like it depends on the brand and how they see Iwoca. And I think factoring human behavior in predictions is always where you're going to get it wrong. And I think that's also very true for the credit thing.
Yeah, I thought about it as well in terms of data science. Like I think, and I just mentioned that in terms of data and AI, what I realized is like things can go wrong really fast. And the difficult thing is we've got losses as well. Like some customers do not repay, or we lend to some frauds. And so the problem is you only notice this a couple of months after lending the money, right? If you lend to someone today, you will only notice that you've lost the money in 3 or 4 months, but not before that, because things are quite uncertain before. Some customers will repay a bit. And so the difficult thing is if you implement a new model today, you will only notice that it's really wrong in 3 to 6 months. And so you really can't mess up. You really need something that works. But on the other hand, you also need to innovate. Otherwise, your business will never...
I was going to say, it's a tough market. You have to grow. So yeah, you have to take risks.
So yeah, you need to take risk. But on the other hand, if you take some risk, you will only get some feedback a couple of months after that. And so that makes everything kind of complex, I think. So that's something. That's why I think it's the problems that we're solving in terms of AI and data science are actually quite difficult, because you want to improve, you want to get better. And on the other hand, you don't want to lose a lot of money, right? Because that could be also very risky.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. It does make the job harder.
Yeah.
More interesting?
It makes it actually, I think, very interesting, because it shows that you don't necessarily need to use the latest algorithms and state of the art. Like you can use very simple algorithms. The problem and the data and the feedback loop makes it very challenging. Like even if you just use a simple algorithm and you get good result, it's still going to be the same problem. Or I need to monitor it. Is it actually going to work? Am I taking enough risk? Am I not taking too much risk? So it's not because the algorithm is simple that the problem is simple. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand. Like if a lot of people, I would say, I'm using a linear regression, they're like, oh, that's very simple. That should be such a simple problem or something like that.
There's 2,000 lines of feature engineering code before make sure the right thing goes into your linear regression. And that's big value. And I guess also we are facing right now a particular challenge with COVID, as the market has changed. So you want to train on the 10 years of data that we have, but it's not really fair because people do behave very differently now. And so it's like starting from scratch. Not exactly, but we have to rethink what we're doing.
Yeah, that's another thing that's super interesting industries that sometimes you don't have enough data or you just don't
Yep.
have data. And that's super challenging because if you're, as you mentioned, if the behavior of the customers is changing, you can maybe just throw all the past data away. And so you just start from scratch, and not having data is super difficult.
Oh, and I guess it's coming to me now, but like, one thing that's particular to credit, or maybe other industries, but when you're at Lyft and you want to test something, you do an A/B test. And sure, some people will take more rides and some will take less rides, but it's not really like there's an opportunity cost to your A/B test that's okay, you can live with. In credit, you can't really afford to give loans and people would then default and not reimburse you.
Mhm.
Like the cost of getting your test wrong or testing this is really high. So you don't have as much flexibility in doing as many A/B tests as you want.
Yeah. And I guess also in Lyft, maybe the feedback loop is faster. Like if you test something within a couple of days or weeks, you get the answer, right?
Yeah.
For
so
us,
Lyft, but Lyft had another thing that I think it's actually interesting on A/B test for Lyft, but it has other issues in the sense that you can never really split your group of people. Like when you give loans, you can completely split in groups of people you give a loan to. They're independent.
Yeah.
In Lyft, if I add drivers for a group but not the other, of course they will be affected because people will steal like drives from the other one.
Mhm.
So if I increase the demand from a group where the other one has less drivers, so they are affected. So you can never have a market with independent A/B test, and that creates complication by itself.
Do you know how you could deal with that? Like if
well, I can't say that it's my favorite. It was the favorite like interview question at least.
Really?
Well, yeah, it's a very interesting question to see how people react.
I haven't thought about this because you're right. At Iwoca, we can really split the groups.
Yes.
And so I'm interested. How does this work?
So it's completely not independent, right? So there are two ways to go. There's the data scientist approach, which is, well, I'm going to do a full model and like evaluate the inferences between the group, and I'm going to like correct the result of my A/B test.
Mm-hmm.
But that's really, really difficult. And some people were doing it, but it's really advanced stats. Really cool. And then there's a little bit more pragmatic approach. It's like, well, I'm going to do 1 hour, 1 hour, 1 hour, 1 hour, and like do my split test on time, like by time window. And I'm going to do it on 2 weeks to make sure that 1 week I have the 8 a.m. and the next week it's the other group that switches at the same time. And you run it for a month if you can.
Okay.
Or you do like per day. So, and you make sure that the guy who does the smart approach kind of validate your weird time A/B test.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe then the next time you don't actually have to do the weird A/B test, but you do have to split it independently.
Yeah, so that's I guess that's a challenge, that a problem that we don't have at Iwoca. We could just split between half of the customers will get this kind of product, half will get this other kind, and then just compare the results.
Exactly. But I think it happens more often than not, the fact that things are not completely independent. And I think it messes up a lot of tests, or whether it's dependent or something else biases your test. And we don't really, when you're out of school, you don't really think about those things because you've been used to perfectly laid out problems.
So what do you think are the things we should take into account when running an A/B test? What are the common mistakes
you want to learn? What do you want to learn? You ask your question that every day. Otherwise, you'll end up doing something and you end up learning something that you don't really want to learn. So I think that's the main thing. And yes, and then independency for sure. Size effect. Are you sure you're going to actually see something? Do you have to make it run for a year or not? If it runs for a year, it's probably too long.
Mm-hmm. I mean, at Iwoca, it's running for a couple of months because unfortunately you don't get a lot of data.
Exactly, but I'm sure that if we could do it in a shorter time frame, we would.
Yeah. And you can also always analyze data. Well, you don't need to wait for the test to finish to actually analyze the data. You can always like analyze the data after a couple of months, see how it goes, and then continue the test or stop it. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Reassess, get some updates. So yeah. All right. So just now want to focus on the last part, just some questions on your career. We've chatted about, well, you did your master, then you had your first, or not your first, but you had your first job experience, then you joined Lyft, then you did an MBA, now you're at Iwoca, you transitioned, I think, a week ago to product manager. Before that, you were operation strategy lead. So you've done a lot of countries, US, France, UK, you've done a lot of different jobs. So I'm interested to know what's your experience based on that? Do you like to try new things? Do you think you learn more by trying different things? Like if you reflect back to everything you've already done, yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely very different from the old approach of careers where you pick a job and you keep it for 30 years, right? I think it still works today. Some people will be a data scientist for their life, and they will be very good at the job and very happy, and it works for them. I just think I wanted to get experiences in jobs that were a bit different. And I think it comes back to me saying what I like is to be in between teams and jobs that really like help all those teams work together. And so go see what other teams do is kind of helping me doing that. So it's more out of curiosity, but when you really think around it, it looks like it's very different. But there's always been very, very core things that didn't change. It's always tech. It's always very close to data science, business intelligence, and a little bit of product management. And those things haven't really changed. So the role title changed, but there is kind of a clear direction here. So I think the direction is still okay.
There's still a logic, even though it's like different job titles.
Yeah, but the job titles, they do mean different things. I also think that in tech, we're lucky enough, it's kind of a more fluid industry because it's newer. It's much more okay to try new things and come back and do something else. I'm not sure you could have this kind of switch in banks. I'm not sure that every 2 years you can do a completely different job. But I think you can do it in tech. So it's more like if that's something you want to do, you shouldn't refrain from doing it. I wouldn't advise anybody to do it. Like not everybody would like to do data science and then operation strategy.
So just do what you like, follow the
do what you like, make sure there's some kind of a direction. I think don't I mean you can do something completely different, but just know that it's going to hurt a career at some point. Some kind of direction, be able to explain it and why you made those decisions. And yeah, never get bored. Just never get bored. Just try to keep doing stuff you like.
So do you think it's because you get bored easily that you want those kind of frequent switch from one thing to another?
I don't know, Neil. I think it's a much longer discussion.
That's too complex.
No, I think I was genuinely curious. I really wanted to get closer to the business decisions.
And is it not something difficult so you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, like getting your first job is the most difficult one, but because you're not doing I would say, typical path of, data scientist, senior data scientist lead, manager. Do you think it's more difficult because every time you need to kind of relearn everything from scratch, or not from scratch, but relearn a lot of things? Or do you think there is some difficulty in this?
There's definitely a challenge every time you start a job where you don't know how it works. That's for sure. At the same time, I think there is a demand for people who are multitasks. So, for example, now I will not become a data science manager. This is not a role. This is a role meant for people who have really experts in this. But there is a demand in companies for roles like mine. And so for those roles, it's not that hard to move in there. It's just, yeah, it's a bit more challenging because you have to readapt to a very new environment. But it's not challenging to find a job. There are jobs for multitask and multi-skills.
Okay, so it's not challenging to find it. It's more challenging to adapt. But I guess that's also what you like, this new challenge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly true.
Otherwise, you wouldn't do it.
Well, I would have remained a data scientist at Lyft and could have been very happy too.
Yeah. Which is, I guess, still challenging to go up within the same role, but very.
I think if there was one super interesting career path that's not too challenging, but at the same time working, everybody would be there. There's no secret sauce.
Yeah, let me know if you find the easy one. We'll take it. And yeah, I just want to ask 2 quick questions before we finish the episode. I usually ask those to most of my guests. The first one is, based on your experience, what's a good data scientist according to you? Or you can take the problem the other way, like what are common mistakes that you see and what are the things that good data scientists don't do, you know?
Yeah. So I'd say here it's a bit difficult in the sense that data scientists can mean so many things, from the business intelligence to the pure algorithm and maybe optimization specialists. But I think there are some things that always hold true, and we touched on a few of them. So we touched on the ownership and the fact that you have to feel concerned that what you do is impactful, and you have to focus on the fact that. And one common mistake I see is, whether you're a specialist or just a data analyst, people, particularly at the beginning of the career, they do stuff just because they think it's cool, like it's the cool algorithm to do, or it's the cool analysis to do. But to be fair, that's not the right question. The right question is like, is this going to have an impact on what my company does and the people around me? And so refocusing on that is probably what will make you a good data scientist. Always start by the easy thing. We touched on that too. Always start by the easy thing. But if I want to hire a data scientist and they throw me an XGBoost algorithm at the beginning, I'm like, no, for sure, you're not doing the right thing. For sure, you're not doing it. Like, really not. Understand the data you get, always. Never do that. And I would say finally, but I think because I find it really, really important, is like, be thorough. Like, if you give a number out there, if someone asks you for a number on algorithm and you give it, you have to be like 100% sure it's the right number you're giving. Like, you checked, you double checked, like, be reliable on the things you say. Or say, hey, I'm 80% sure it's the right thing, but
the Bayesian approach, you give a probability distribution.
Yeah, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's something. So you mentioned at the beginning impact, and that's something that I'm personally really interested in. Like, I wouldn't really care what algorithm I use or what tool I use, but I really want to have impact. Like, if I work on a project where I use the latest algorithm, but I know it's not going to impact the business at all, or it's just going to, I don't know, increase the accuracy or whatever, or the profit by, 0.1%, then I wouldn't care about the project and I'm not going to do it well. But if I know there is a lot of value, I can help a lot of customers or make the business grow, then I would be very interested. And I don't care which tool I use, as long as the project works and it gets the impact that it needs to have.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's something that everybody has to be aware of. And like, if you end up in a small company like ours, you will end up doing a lot of things differently. But if what you like is really having the best possible big algorithm, you might want to join a much bigger company where your job is actually to improve those algorithms by a few, because when we're talking about millions and millions of pounds per day of transactions, 0.01% is very significant.
Yeah.
So decide also which kind of company you go to, depending on what you want to work on.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's something that I really like at Iwoca, is even when you just start, or even after a year, you're going to have responsibilities and you're going to do things that you can actually see are going to have an impact. And it's not like you're building an algorithm which is going to be deployed in 1 year and in 5 years it's going to maybe do something. It's really like you work on a project and in 2 weeks your algorithm is in the system, and if it doesn't work, that's on you. So you really have like a lot of impact.
It's pros and cons. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. Pros and cons, but it's really cool to see that you're really important and that you actually have an impact on the company and that what you do really matters.
I agree. And I think at Iwoca, they do give a lot of responsibility, even to very young employees, which is really cool.
All right. So just last question, one advice for someone to progress in their career. If you just had one advice, what would it be? Work
hard. I thought about this because you can always make plans, make you never know if it works. The one thing that works is like, if every week you work hard, you learn and it's going to pay out at some point. So yeah. I tell myself that when I don't know what to do next and what job to do, I'm like, just refocus on what you do now, and it's going to help you progress.
Well, thanks a lot, Marguerite. It was great to have you here and chat with you. I really learned a lot from you, so thanks a lot. Thanks
for having me. Very happy to close this season.
Yeah, same. And yeah, have a good day. Enjoy your weekend. And yeah, let's catch up in the office next week.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.